Hi, I'm Georgia Raisman. I'm here on Front Up today with Paul Bruno, an island yoga instructor and somebody I've known for a few years and I really look forward to talking with. So Paul, tell me a little bit about your background and your background in yoga and how you got to Nantucket.
Okay. Hi, Georgia. How are you? Thanks for the invite. I got to Nantucket as a college student. I came to paint houses as a way of
Another typical story, right?
As a way of putting myself through school. I was a scholarship student at Fairfield University, but I needed to make a substantial amount of money in order to get myself through each semester. And I came here and started painting when I was just after my freshman year. And then I missed the deadline to graduate school because of the old general delivery system, and had no place else to go, so just stayed here for my first winter. That was 1974.
Oh my gosh. So it was the mail. The mail delivery was that bad
delivery.
Even then?
Yes, of course.
I thought that was just a recent problem. It's a perpetual problem.
No, perpetual.
Well, how like that? So the mail determined your career.
Yes, it kind of kept me here. I did eventually go back to graduate school, but it was years later. What was your
field as an undergraduate?
I wanted to be a teacher. So, and here I am, so many years later, teaching, just in a different way than I thought I was going to.
So then you stayed here, and what sort of jobs did you find yourself doing?
I stayed here, worked in the restaurant business just like everybody else. I spent some time building houses and sidewall shingling and house painting, just all of that. And then I wound up in a retail women's clothing business with my wife at Zero Main. And as we started to get more settled in that business, I started to do yoga with her encouragement, and once we got the business up and settled and running, we had a group of women who wanted more responsibility, so I backed myself out of the women's clothing business, and Noel said, but you have to do something worthwhile, you can't just hang around with your friends. So
not an unreasonable position.
Not an unreasonable request, right? So I had already been practicing yoga for probably 5 or 6 years, so it was just a matter of taking that practice and starting to teach. So
what sort of training is there in becoming a yoga instructor?
Well, it was interesting because it's very simple. There's the basic training is 200 hours, so that's a very simple training. It could be done in a month, but in the 6 years that we had been practicing, we also took vacations to study with some of the well-known teachers in the United States at the time. So my training really started almost right away. By the time I got certified in Costa Rica, it was an interesting certification program, but I had already been studying with some of the top teachers in the United States.
So there are different strands of yoga,
yes,
I take it. So tell me about the different strands of yoga.
There's as many branches of yoga as there are branches on a tree. So basically there's 3 types. One, the 2 most popular types deal with making muscles stronger, and muscles love either repetitive motion or dynamic tension. So the repetitive motion branch of the yoga tree is Ashtanga Vinyasa, Power Vinyasa, Forest Yoga. So it's repetitive motion done either in a natural or heated room. The other ways that muscles love being worked is with dynamic tension, so that's Bikram's yoga or Iyengar yoga or Hatha yoga class.
What does dynamic tension mean?
Just resistance training.
Oh.
So you take a posture, you hold the posture with a muscular engagement for 3 to 5 breaths.
I think that's probably what people understand by yoga, isn't it?
Yeah, that's one of those 2 branches. Either, take a posture, hold it with muscle, or take a posture and hold it for a breath or 2 and then keep moving.
Huh.
So that's to make muscles stronger, to make heart stronger, increase the respiratory system. So the third style is the style I'm primarily known as a teacher now, which is Yin Yoga, which bypasses muscularity in favor of connective tissue stretch.
I think the Yin Yoga is what I really wanted to speak to you about, because the first 2 branches that you mentioned are by far better known.
Yes, absolutely.
And everybody understands what they are, and some people think of them as I do, I have to say, given my body shape, I'm never going to get my ankle behind my knee.
That's exactly
I'm not
right.
going to be that kind of yoga person ever. But Yin Yoga has a totally different goal, a totally different objective, and totally different effects on your body, different parts of your body. And I've found it hugely helpful, and so many other people on island have. It's become popular here, maybe not so much nationally as it should be. So
Well,
tell people what's it about. First off, why is it called yin yoga?
Yin yoga because it deals with yin tissue as opposed to muscle, which is considered yang. So if you picture in your mind's eye that famous yin yang symbol,
The white and
with
black
the white
thing
and
where
black,
they fit
with
together.
a little squiggle, right? If it was a straight line between the two of them, it would connote opposition. But because it's a curvilinear line and they kind of nestle in one another, they're considered complementary. So yin yoga is a complementary practice to yang activity. Oftentimes when you make muscles stronger, you make connective tissue more rigid. Your ligaments and your tendons become tighter and bigger. And yin yoga is a way of bypassing the muscularity of a posture in favor of the stretch of connective tissue. So in yin yoga, we hold a posture for 3 to 5 minutes, not 3 to 5 breaths. We hold it without a muscular engagement. We let gravity kind of slowly unravel muscle, ligament, and tendon so that we can establish elasticity as opposed to sometimes rigidity that comes with a bigger muscle.
And yoga itself is an ancient Indian tradition or Asian tradition?
It's a complicated question because most of the yoga that we know actually started in Denmark.
Really?
The Danish and the Swedes.
Is this ancient Scandinavian tradition?
Oddly enough, the postures. A lot of the postures came from the harmonic movement. It was a movement, a movement of becoming more muscularly fit that came from Sweden and Denmark, wound up in Britain, and the Brits took it to India as a part of their physical fitness
When
craze.
was this? When was this?
Oh, I don't know the dates. So,
But are we talking about 19th century, 20th century?
we're talking the occupation of the Brits in India.
So 19th century.
Yeah, probably. So when the Brits left, the government felt like the population was going to be too soft to actually run a country. So they wanted to train the police and the army to become more muscularly fit. And so a couple of these institutes started to incorporate yoga as a way of making their ruling party stronger and more fit. So you have Denmark, Sweden, Britain to India, where the new government decided to start to train their young men to be more physically active. And so yoga became part of that.
How interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. A lot of people get shocked by that.
Absolutely, what a startling. So is the yin part of yoga an American offshoot of that? Or
It
is
is.
It an ancient offshoot?
No, it's a American offshoot of that. There was a teacher, my teacher, his name is Paul Grilly. Paul was involved in muscular yoga, and he was always injured, and he couldn't figure out why, with as much yoga as he was doing, why he was always injured. So he actually quit being a yoga teacher because he was afraid that he was teaching injury to people. So he quit, tried to went to school to become an anatomist, because at that time yoga teachers were thinking, we were teaching anatomy that seemed to be 18th century rather than modern. So when he went back to school, he found this whole body that he never realized he had, which is his fascial body, his connective tissue body. And that body needs a different workout than a muscular body.
So was this in the 80s?
Yes, this is in the 80s.
So it's very recent.
Yeah, very recent.
Isn't that interesting? So he, taking that knowledge, developed a series of movements that would exercise the areas in between muscles, in between large muscles.
That's exactly right. So you have muscle fibers that interweave with other muscle fibers in order to create a hamstring or a quadricep or a bicep. And then that connective tissue tightens becomes part of the tendon. That tendon attaches through more connective tissue to anchor into the bones. The bones are joined together by ligaments. You have sheets of connective tissue underneath your body. So his whole idea was, if we could make connective tissue more elastic, if we could get it so that it moves properly, that injury will diminish. And the reason why he quit teaching a style of yoga was because he felt like he was teaching students how to become injured.
And so yin yoga, then, what exactly does it do to all of that? I know that because I've been in your classes and you explain it, but explain it more generally for
It just puts a
people who don't know.
moderate amount of stress on muscle, ligament, and tendon, but that stress is done in a way that promotes elasticity rather than muscular strength.
And it's passive stress, as you say.
Passive, yes.
Stress because it's gravity induced.
We
It's
use
not-
gravity. Gravity, in most cases, isn't your friend, but in this case, gravity is the agent of change.
So you take a posture that you hold by reason of gravity rather than muscle tension, and then the gravity induces this.
Release, an unraveling. So instead of making things tighter, we're trying to make them a little bit looser, a little more elasticized.
And you talk about some fluidity and some.
Yeah, the second thing that happens in a yin yoga posture is once you're in a shape and you're in that shape for 3 to 5 minutes, there's always going to be skeletal compression without using muscle to hold you, and the fact that gravity is pulling you. There's always going to be a place where the bones push together. And it turns out that when you push bones together in a non-habitual way, you stimulate production of the lubricant inside your joints called synovial fluid.
So there's lubrication inside joints.
Joints,
Who
yes.
knew?
And oftentimes it gets burned up. So we try to compress the skeleton in a way that promotes this rejuvenation of the juice inside the joint.
So it must make people more limber then.
Yes, that's the
whole idea.
purpose, is to decompress the skeleton by becoming more elastic, but then compress the skeleton in a way that makes the joints naturally more graceful. So we're trying to look to slower moving, more interior tissue to be under stress in a way that allows for freedom of movement.
So have people been responding? Have you seen a lot of response on Island to physical response to the yin yoga classes? Do people see a lot of improvement?
15 years ago, when I first started to teach this style of yoga,
How wonderful.
it was empty classrooms. And now, by and large, my classes are full or almost full, because people are starting to recognize there's more information out there. They're starting to recognize that just working one portion of their physical body isn't enough, that in order to complete the picture, that they need to get some kind of connective tissue elasticity and skeletal renewal. So we're just filling up that circle. We're completing the circle rather than just constantly being on the yang end of the circle. We're starting to see more and more people interested in balancing their body by doing a yin practice.
So, and where do you teach yin yoga?
I teach yin yoga in two public places. I teach yin yoga at the Yoga Room on Fairgrounds Road on Sundays at 5, and also at Supta Yoga, which is on Amelia Drive. They've been there for a couple of years now. And then 2 private clubs.
And the private clubs have winter memberships?
One of the private clubs has a winter membership. So the Westmore Club has a winter membership, and that membership drive is starting now. So those people who watch the program who are interested in that winter program, to go up to
I
Westmore.
noticed that Westmore's winter program has discounts for firemen, policemen, teachers. Did you know that?
Yes, I did know that.
I thought that was a really great move.
It is a fascinating thing.
It's
yes.
not awfully expensive, and then with a 20% discount for those people, it's really seems like a very good idea.
And it's
family discounts.
And a great place for people who live stressful lives to actually go do something that helps de-stress. So teachers, firemen, police officers.
Right. Well, I hope people do more of the yin yoga. It's a fascinating practice. And I found, too, that you can look up on YouTube, believe it or not.
Yes.
Because when I was not here and couldn't take your yin yoga classes, I wanted to see more about it. And one can look on YouTube and find some of those practices.
It's interesting. The YouTube has a wide open base of information. So those students that are going to go to YouTube in order to see what this is all about, they should just go to YouTube, but go to Paul Grilly. because there's always, it's like, do you remember the game of telephone that you played when you were...
No matter how far when you get far away,
yeah,
it
when
gets
you
less
get
accurate.
far away from the source, it becomes less accurate. So, you know, the great part about YouTube and these open channels of information is that you can go back to the source, and a lot of the misconceptions about yin yoga can be just bypassed by getting closer to the original. So Paul Grilly is the original. You can go to Sarah Powers. Sarah Powers actually talks a lot about yin yoga. She's a secondary source that's very, very close to Paul Grilly. That's
how does he spell his name?
Grilley.
L-L-E-Y. So this island seems to be very preoccupied with yoga. There's an awful lot of yoga. Do you do any yoga at the yoga festival in the summer?
I practice with some of the visiting yoga teachers, but don't teach there. Although Shauna Green, who is the director of the yoga studio of the yoga room, and Meg Taft-Rohrer, who's the director of Supta Yoga, have been in the past taught there, and I've acted as an assistant or as a co-teacher.
Because that would be another way of getting the word out to a larger group
Absolutely,
of people.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this is great, Paul. Thank you for coming by and
Georgia,
talking to
thanks
me.
for
And I hope
having
that we
me
get
over.
this to a wider audience. It's such a great practice.
Thank you so very much. It's so great
Nice
to see you.
Thanks
so
again.
much.